The noon sun burned mercilessly across the Kansas frontier, bleaching the prairie grass into brittle stalks of gold. Dust rose in thin spirals from the trail, clinging to the sweat-streaked neck of the lone rider who moved slow and steady, his horse plodding beneath him like it had carried too many hard miles. Jeb Callahan was a cowboy through and through, the kind you could spot from half a mile away, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with eyes that had seen more than most men cared to remember. His hat brim was sweat-stained, his boots scuffed from years of cattle drives, and the colt on his hip looked like it belonged there, not for show, but because a man needed it if he aimed to survive out here. He wasn't much for words. The prairie had taught him silence. Out here, the wind spoke, coyotes yipped in the distance, and wagon wheels groaned on faraway trails. A man either listened or he died. Jeb tugged on the reins, slowing his bay mare as he reached a stretch of dry creek bed. He leaned forward, scanning the land. Years of trail riding had taught him that the prairie never truly looked empty. It just waited for your eyes to catch the little things. That's when he saw it. A small figure, hunched near the cracked stones of the creek. At first glance, Jeb thought it was some coyote, half-starved and scavenging. But when the figure lifted its head, the truth hit him harder than a rifle shot. It was a child. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. His clothes were rags, more hide than cloth, hanging loose from a body that was little more than bone. His face was sunken, lips cracked from thirst, and his eyes, dark, deep, unblinking, stared straight at Jeb with a kind of hollow hunger. The boy swayed, too weak to stand. Jeb muttered under his breath, "Well, I'll be damned." He dismounted, boots crunching on the dry stones, and knelt beside the child. "Easy there, kid." He tugged his canteen free and tilted it to the boy's lips. The child drank like a parched animal, coughing, water spilling down his chin, but he didn't let go until Jeb pulled it back. "Slow down," Jeb said softly. "Ain't no good drowning yourself." The boy whispered something in a language Jeb didn't know, soft syllables, broken, like wind over rocks. Jeb caught only one word repeated, "Thank you." "Where's your folks?" Jeb asked, glancing around. But the prairie was silent, no sign of a camp, no shadows on the horizon. Just endless land and that relentless sun. The boy said nothing. He just leaned against Jeb's arm, too weak to move. Jeb's jaw tightened. He'd seen his share of Indian raids, gunfights, and cattle wars. He knew this boy wasn't just some stray dog he could leave behind. Out here, a child left alone was as good as dead. He sighed, hoisted the boy into his arms, and mounted up. "All right, kid. You're coming with me." By nightfall, Jeb reached his ranch. It wasn't much. A rough barn, a small cabin, a few head of cattle and a rail fence. But it was home. He laid the boy down on a straw bed inside the barn, fetched what food he had, and coaxed him to eat. The boy devoured bread and jerky with shaking hands, his eyes wide with something between fear and gratitude. Jeb studied him. There was no mistaking it now. The boy was native, Cheyenne maybe or Arapaho. Jeb wasn't sure. What he did know was that the sight of an Indian child under his roof could stir up more trouble than rattlesnakes in a church pew. But leaving him, that wasn't in Jeb's nature. "Reckon you'll stay here tonight," Jeb said, more to himself than to the boy. "We'll figure the rest tomorrow." The boy curled up in the hay, eyes drifting shut before Jeb had finished speaking. Jeb leaned against the barn door, listening to the creak of wood in the night breeze. He couldn't shake the feeling that taking the child in had set something in motion. Like a match struck in dry grass. The next morning, the sound woke him. Not the cry of cattle, not the whistle of wind through the rafters. It was a low thunder, steady, growing louder by the second. Jeb grabbed his rifle, shoved open the barn doors, and froze. Out on the prairie, stretching across the horizon, were riders. Dozens of them, scores, 200 at least, moving in a long line, feathers catching the rising sun, spears and rifles glinting. Painted horses stamped the ground, and war cries carried on the wind like the rumble of a storm. They were headed straight for his barn. Jeb's gut tightened. He didn't need anyone to tell him who they were. Warriors. Cheyenne. And he had their child. The boy stirred behind him, blinking awake. The moment his eyes landed on the riders outside, he whispered one word, a name. And Jeb understood then. This child wasn't just anybody. He was somebody's son, and 200 warriors had come to claim him. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Jeb stood in the doorway of his barn, his rifle heavy in his hands, staring at the sight no rancher ever wanted to see, an army of horsemen sweeping across the prairie. The Cheyenne warriors rode in perfect formation, their ponies kicking up clouds of golden earth. The morning sun caught on feathers, beads, and polished rifle barrels. Their war cries echoed low and haunting, not yet raised to battle pitch, but enough to make the earth itself seem to tremble. And they weren't passing through. They were coming for him. Behind Jeb, the boy scrambled from the hay pile, small hands clinging to Jeb's leg. His dark eyes weren't afraid of the riders. No, there was recognition there. Relief even. The boy spoke something fast and urgent in Cheyenne, words Jeb couldn't follow. "Easy, kid," Jeb muttered, eyes still locked on the advancing line. His gut told him the truth, this wasn't an attack. Not yet. This was a reckoning. The riders slowed, fanning out across the open ground in front of his ranch. Dust swirled around them like smoke. At their head rode a towering figure, bare, chested save for painted symbols across his chest, eagle feathers streaming from his braided hair. His presence radiated command, the kind of authority Jeb had only seen in seasoned trail bosses or hardened generals. The man raised his hand, and the warriors behind him stilled. Horses pawed at the earth, snorting, restless. The leader dismounted, walking forward with the slow, measured steps of a man who feared nothing. Jeb took a breath, lowered his rifle barrel a fraction, but didn't let go of it. Out here, trust was earned one heartbeat at a time. The warrior stopped a few paces away. His eyes were sharp, black as obsidian. He looked at Jeb, then at the child, who rushed forward, crying out in his tongue. The man's face softened for a fraction of a second. He knelt, catching the boy in his arms, holding him close. Relief rippled through the gathered warriors. A murmur of approval, of joy, like wind through tall grass. Jeb finally let out the breath he'd been holding. The warrior looked back at him, speaking in broken English. "You helped my son." You Jeb nodded slowly, found him near dead. Couldn't leave him. The warrior studied him for a long time, then said simply, "You have honor." The moment should have ended there. The boy safe, the father grateful, the warriors turning back to their people. But the West wasn't that simple. The sound of hooves broke the quiet. From the trail to town, another group of riders appeared. Not Cheyenne, not ranchers, but outlaws. A dozen of them, guns slung low, dust masks over their faces. At their head rode a man Jeb knew all too well, Clay McGraw. A cattle rustler, murderer, and all-around devil with a gun. McGraw had been sniffing around this county for weeks, and the sheriff hadn't had the spine to deal with him. McGraw reined up, his eyes darting from Jeb to the wall of Cheyenne warriors. A grin spread across his scared face. Well, McGraw drawled. "Ain't this a picture? Cowboy playing nursemaid to a redskin brat. And look at this, whole tribe showed up on your doorstep." He laughed, a harsh sound. "Seems to me, there's opportunity here." Jeb's stomach sank. McGraw was like a rattler. He never struck unless he thought he could profit. "What you want, Clay?" Jeb called out, his voice steady. McGraw spat. "That ranch of yours. Always had my eye on it. But now, I reckon I got leverage. Sheriff don't like Injuns gathering this close to town. Folks'll panic. He'll come riding with his deputies. And when he does, bullets'll fly. Your barn'll burn, and I'll pick through what's left." The Cheyenne leader rose to his feet, anger flashing in his eyes, though he didn't fully understand McGraw's words. He knew enough. His hand went to the hatchet at his belt. The prairie held its breath. It happened fast. McGraw's men drew first, rifles coming up. Jeb barely had time to shout before the thunder cracked. Gunfire splitting the morning sky. Bullets whistled past. Horses screamed. Warriors answered with their own rifles. The air filled with smoke and dust. Jeb dove for cover, dragging the boy behind a trough, firing back at the outlaws. He saw McGraw's men scatter, some taking shots at the Cheyenne, others at Jeb's barn. Boards splintered, hay caught fire. The Cheyenne warriors thundered forward, a wave of painted fury. War cries split the air as they cut down outlaws with spears and rifles, their ponies darting fast as shadows. Jeb fought like a man with nothing to lose. His rifle cracked, dropping one outlaw who'd taken aim at the boy. He swung up empty, drew his Colt, and fired again, the recoil sharp in his wrist. Through the chaos, he saw McGraw, laughing, firing, spurring his horse straight for the barn. Jeb knew what he meant to do. Burn it. Burn everything Jeb had built. With a roar, Jeb sprinted through the smoke, tackled McGraw clean out of the saddle. The two men hit the dirt hard, rolling fists flying. McGraw's knife flashed, slicing Jeb's arm, but Jeb drove a punch into his jaw, felt bone crunch. The fight was savage, primal, both men grappling in the dust while gunfire raged around them. McGraw spat blood, snarling, "You should have stayed out of this, cowboy." Jeb's fist silenced him, one final blow dropping him cold. When Jeb staggered to his feet, the fight was already over. The outlaws were broken, scattered. Some lay dead, others fled across the prairie with Cheyenne warriors in hot pursuit. Smoke rose from the edge of the barn, but the fire had been stamped out before it could spread. The boy clung to his father, safe at last. And the Cheyenne leader stood before Jeb, solemn, proud. "You fight, not for you. For us. For him," the man said, resting a hand on his son's head. "We do not forget." Jeb wiped the blood from his mouth, nodding. "Just did what needed doing." The leader raised his hand, and 200 warriors lifted their voices in a cry that shook the prairie. Not a war cry this time, a cry of respect, of honor given where it was due. For Jeb Callahan, the cowboy who had saved a starving child and stood his ground against the storm. And as the dust settled, Jeb knew one thing with certainty. Out here in the Wild West, a man's choices echoed louder than gunfire.